Old Grognard says, let's take a quick look at the Complete Psionics Handbook for 2nd edition AD&D. As the title says, this is a brief overview of the Complete Psionics Handbook. This video's purpose is to serve as the Volume 1 in a series of videos that'll cover the individual aspects of psionics in greater detail. Let's start by looking at how the Complete Psionics Handbook fits into 2nd edition in general, starting with how it fits into the real-world timeline. The Complete Psionics Handbook was published in 1991. That puts it 2 years after the PHB and the same year as Dark Sun, which is good, since Athos doesn't really work without psionics. One of the things you have to keep in mind with 2nd edition is that 2nd edition isn't built around a default setting and is instead built more like a game engine, with the settings like Spelljammer, Dark Sun, Forgotten Realms, etc. being the actual game. How books like the Complete Psionics Handbook fit into this, then, is that they function as plugins or developer assets to help the engine run a given setting. So you might have one setting like Dark Sun where psionics are everywhere and they're central to the functioning and lore of the setting. In this case, we would use the Complete Psionics Handbook plugin to help the engine run the game. On the other hand, there are settings like Dragonlance where psionics are unknown and the Complete Psionics Handbook plugin isn't used at all. Most other settings are somewhere in between, with the DM choosing where the metaphorical dial is set, depending on what kind of game they're running. With that bit of context out of the way, let's go on to page 6 in the Complete Psionics Handbook and look at what the introduction has to say. The first important thing is that they define psionics. Psionics are defined as extraordinary psychic powers. They then go on to explain how psionics are different in 2nd edition versus 1st edition. The main points are that there's now a psionicist character class, there are more psionic powers than before, and that the game's mechanics behind how these powers work are different. With the changes, they emphasize that the definitions of things have also changed, so read carefully and don't assume that things work the same way that they did back in 1st edition. The last thing the intro covers is that there's a block of text in the lower right-hand corner titled, "How does this fit my campaign?" and it goes on to say this, quote, "There's no reason why adding psionics to an existing campaign should disrupt anything. As a class, psionicists are no more or less powerful than any other. Guidelines on how to introduce psionics without trauma are given in Chapter 9. Remember, everything in this book is optional. None of it is part of the core of the AD&D game. If something in here doesn't suit a particular campaign, rule it out," unquote. So basically they're reiterating what I said earlier. The DM can veto anything in this book, up to and including the entire book, if they don't feel that it's right for the kind of game they're running. This is good because unless I'm running Dark Sun or another setting that has psionics built into the setting as a core aspect, I don't use psionics. I feel like it just makes the game more complicated without making the game better. That's just my opinion. You may feel differently about it, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. So let's go back up here and look at the Psionicist class. The Psionicist class will get its own video later, so this is just an overview. The ability requirements are Constitution 11, Intelligence 12, and Wisdom 15, with Con and Wisdom being the prime requisites. Next, they show us the allowed races, multi-class combos, and level limits. These may change from setting to setting, so check what the settings rules are for psionics, or if you're a player, it never hurts to just ask the DM. Psionicists have 6-sided hit dice, and their THAC0 progression is the same as a rogue. They have their own saving throw table, and there's a note about how they get, quote, +2 bonus on all saving throws versus enchantment charm spells and the like. This is in addition to their magical defense adjustment for high wisdom, unquote. For armor, the book says padded leather, studded leather, and hide. Small shields are also allowed. I interpret the padded leather thing as a typo, and it means padded or leather as far as I'm concerned. There are also special restrictions regarding metal armor and helmets. So this is the allowed weapon list. The Psionicist starts with 2 weapon proficiencies and gains another one every 5 levels. Their non-proficiency penalty is -4. In addition to all this, the Psionicist obviously gets psionic abilities. Let's look at how psionic abilities are structured and how they work. Psionic powers are broken into 6 groups called disciplines. These work something like how schools of magic work. Let's look at what they are. Clairsentience is the discipline that is about allowing a character to gain knowledge that is beyond their normal senses. The book gives being able to hear or see things miles away or sense poison as examples. Psychokinesis is the discipline that's about moving objects through space with mental power alone. The examples given are moving rocks without touching them, or agitating the molecules in a sheet of paper until it bursts into flames. Psychometabolism contains powers that affect the body. Biofeedback, healing, and shape-changing are given as examples. Psychoportation involves powers that move characters or creatures from one location to another without crossing space. This not only includes teleportation, but also planar travel and travel through time. Telepathy involves direct contact between 2 or more minds. Mind reading, personality swapping, and psychic attacks are given as examples. Metapsionics is the last discipline of the 6, and covers powers that amplify, augment, or enhance other psionic abilities. The book says of metapsionics, quote, "This is an advanced, demanding discipline," unquote. Within these disciplines, there are major powers, which are called sciences. Under them, there are minor powers, and they're called devotions. How powers are used in game is a complicated enough subject that it deserves its own video, but the basic idea is that the psionicist expends psionic strength points to activate a psionic power, and then rolls to see if the power works. These rolls work like non-weapon proficiency checks for the most part, so if a power says that the power score is Con -2, and the character's constitution is 14, the player has to roll a 12 or less for the power to work. There's more to it than that, especially when we get into psionic combat, but that's the basic idea. There are a few other things worth mentioning that aren't in the introduction. One of them is the subject of wild talents. Characters may have psionic abilities even though they aren't a psionicist. This can happen in a variety of ways. Don't worry, wild talents are going to be the subject of a future video. The next thing worth mentioning is how magic and psionics interact with each other. The short answer is that they don't, unless there's a direct head-to-head conflict, so detect magic doesn't detect psionic activity. Dispel magic doesn't dispel psionic activity. There's more to it than that, and again, I think we've found a subject for a future video. The last thing I'd like to mention is that there are psionic monsters in the back of the book. They use psionics the same way characters do for the most part, so if you have psionics in your game, it's good to have psionic enemies to fight. Otherwise, I would be cautious about using them. Alright, it's time for the list of page numbers at the end of the video. While I have these up, I'd like to thank everyone who watches these videos. I really enjoy making them, and I also enjoy knowing that sometimes folks actually learn stuff that's useful to them in their game. We've made it to where there are quite a few videos explaining AD&D 2nd Edition, and if you'd like to check those out, that would be great. I also do videos on D6 Star Wars if you'd like to learn more about that system. With that out of the way, let's go to our outro. Thanks for watching. The Good Idea Fairy and I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day.